Order. Ben Goldsborough to move the motion.
Thank you very much. I beg to move that this House has considered biosecurity. Can I take a moment to thank you, Dame Siobhan? It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and this is also my first ever Westminster Hall debate that I'm leading, so thank you very much. Honourable members may wonder why I have secured a debate on such a wide-ranging issue as biosecurity. Our changing climate means new diseases can thrive here in the UK. More interconnected supply chains are placing unprecedented pressure on our borders, and for food security and economic growth, stability is vital. Yet biohazards can undermine our vital horticulture and agriculture sectors. These risks are not abstract concepts, but tangible realities for the communities we represent. I thank honourable members, and including my honourable friend, the Minister, for his support since being elected, because I have faced such biosecurity threats in the South Norfolk constituency. I bring this to the House today because South Norfolk has been directly affected. Many will recall the blue tongue outbreak first identified in Hadscoe on the 26th of August this year, and the chaos wrought by the largest avian influenza outbreak in 22-23. In this debate, I'll press the Minister on a number of points, but including the need to strengthen our border controls, reappraisal of the insurance industry's practices, improved preparedness of the Animal and Plant Health Agency, closer collaboration with trade bodies. Let me also commend the Government for the much-needed investment of £208 million to transform our biosecurity at the Weybridge site. It's a much-needed step forward. Now, turning our attention to blue tongue. Honourable members will recall the recent outbreak which began in my constituency. It was first identified in the small village of Hadscoe, and a 20-kilometre temporary control zone was swiftly established, but the situation sadly escalated. By the 30th of August, Norfolk, Suffolk were placed under restriction zones. 2nd of September, this extended to Essex. By mid-November, control zones now stretch from Lowestoft to Southampton, Brighton to Scarborough. Some infected animals may experience productivity issues, including a reduced milk yield. In some of the most severe cases, it will cause abortions, malformations, and fatalities. However, it is important to note that blue tongue disease does not affect people. The meat and milk from infected animals, it does remain safe. But farmers in South Norfolk and across affected counties have been resilient and conscientious in the face of this outbreak and the restrictions placed upon them. But those living in the restriction zone have been hit by a double whammy of price deductions being implemented by some abattoirs. Price cuts of up to 50p per kilo have been imposed by some sites looking to cover the additional costs associated with the disease. This impact is being handed down to farmers despite farmers having been selflessly going above and beyond to protect their own livestock and that of their neighbours. Would the Minister be inclined to meet with me to ensure that farmers are not subjected to more further price deductions and discuss the long-term measures that we can take to prevent future outbreaks? Now, turning to avian influenza, the 22-23 outbreak was devastating. Mass seabird die-offs and widespread high pathogenic avian influenza protection zones put across basically the majority of the country, but particularly Norfolk. Recent cases of H5N5 in Yorkshire and H5N1 in Cornwall highlight the continuing threat that this poses to our poultry market. There are some pressing issues outside a biosecurity issue that are financial in matter. South Norfolk farmers have told me that they are finding it near impossible to get insurance cover for avian influenza outbreaks, creating a risk to producers being forced to leave the industry. I would love the Minister to be able to explain at the end in his wind-up if he would be able to investigate the possibility of picking up where the insurance providers are dropping the ball and where they're failing to introduce their support, and would he consider a state-backed scheme to help affected farmers re-enter the poultry industry following an outbreak. Currently, compensation for AI is paid out to owners of birds. However, many farms operate on a contract basis and so miss out on that compensation. Again, I would really love if the Minister was able to tell us if you'll consider steps to ensure contract growers receive their fair share of compensation from insurers. And of course, the perpetual worry is always going to be on border security in this area. Farmers in South Norfolk tell me that they are really concerned about the controls on meat and livestock entering the UK market. So would the Minister agree to consider reassessing the level of controls on these imported goods to give our farmers peace of mind? Now, African swine fever is a huge issue for Norfolk. We are one of the biggest pork markets. which is to a former member for South West Norfolk, not the current member of South West Norfolk, was obviously a huge deal. The UK pig industry is worth £8 billion annually. It faces a potential crisis if African swine fever breaches our borders. The disease is present in multiple European countries, and the consequences of an outbreak could cost between £10 to £100 million, according to the NFU. I welcome, in September 24, the government took the ban on personal imports of pork from high-risk areas, and DEFRA then implemented a £3.1 million investment into the Dover Port Health Authority, a much-needed step forward. However, given the critical importance of the pork industry to Norfolk, I would urge the Minister to outline further steps that he will be taking to prevent African swine fever outbreak in the UK. Now, it's not just all livestock, it's also crops that we have to be concerned of when it comes to biosecurity. And virus yellows is a key area, again, for East Anglia, because it is a sugar beet disease. The sugar beet industry is a cornerstone of British agricultural economy, supporting around 9,500 jobs, and is anchored by 4 British sugar factories, all located in the east of England. However, this sector faces significant threat from virus yellows, a devastating group of diseases that's caused by 3 different viruses. These viruses are transmitted by aphids, which feed on the sugar beet crops. Unlike growers on the continent, UK farmers are particularly vulnerable to the virus due to our maritime climate. Typically, cold winters suppress the aphid populations, reducing the risk of transmission. However, milder winters, driven by climate change, allow aphids to survive for longer and thrive. And if these aphids carry over the disease from the previous year to the new year, they can infest crops as early as spring, compounding the threat to the British sugar beet yields. The year of 2020 really serves as a stark warning. A mild winter combined with early aphid migration created a perfect storm, leading to a catastrophic loss for many growers. Without interventions, these conditions are likely to become more frequent. NFU Sugar has predicted that in future years, the UK sugar beet crop area could shrink by up to 25% if a sustainable solution isn't found to virus yellows. Now, genetic engineering offers a promising path forward, and I welcome the government's proactive steps in this area, especially as I have the Norwich Research Park, which hugely benefits from precision breeding legislation that we are passing. However, as NFU Sugar rightly points out, this is no silver bullet. A truly effective response must form part of a broader integrated strategy to address the challenges posed by these viruses. Can the Minister provide an update on the actions being taken to support British sugar industry, specifically what is being done to accelerate precision breeding efforts, improve aphid management, and ensure sustainable yields for our farmers in the face of mounting climate-related challenges? Now, I'm not just wanting to focus solely on agriculture. Horticulture is another vital industry for the UK. Now, biosecurity is a critical concern for them as well. If plant diseases breach our defences, the consequences could be devastating, not just for growers, but for the environment and our wider economy. While the most pressing threats is Xylella, a bacterial disease that will host on a wide range of plants, including trees such as the British oak. Now, the risk of introduction to the UK via infected host plants is a growing concern. To tackle this and other biosecurity challenges, the Horticultural Trades Association has laid out several critical recommendations, which I would pose to the Minister now. 1, an urgent border policy summit. 2, a review of UK commodity risk categorisation. 3, enhanced pest and disease testing capabilities. And finally, an active international engagement to reassure the global horticulture market and the fresh produce supply chains that the UK is open for trade in a safe and secure manner. Now, biosecurity is not merely about safeguarding industries. It's about protecting livelihoods of farmers and food security of the nation. In South Norfolk, from poultry to sugar beet to livestock, our communities are working tirelessly to meet these challenges, and I know that they have the full support of the House in the actions that are doing to protect us all. I call on the Minister to act decisively today, strengthen our borders, work with insurers and provide the resources and partnerships needed to keep the UK's biosecurity resilience the world-class status that it deserves. Let us meet these challenges head-on, ensuring that our agricultural and horticultural industries remain robust for generations to come. Thank you.
I remind members that should they wish to contribute to the debate, they should bob. The question is that the House has considered biosecurity. Jim Shannon.
Madam Chair, absolute pleasure to serve under your chairship and to see you in your place once again. Can I thank first of all the honourable member for South Norfolk for leading today's debate on this very important issue. I also see the chair of the APPG in place, and I look forward to his contribution shortly. And I just about the eggs, pigs and poultry APPG, and then it was elevated or whatever to biodiversity. So I hope that was a positive move in the right direction. But the eggs, pigs and poultry is always more exciting, I always thought. But that's by the way. But anyway, good to see the chair in his place, and I look forward to his contribution shortly as well. The remit for biosecurity is shared across government, and the Cabinet Office leads on cross-cutting strategy and preparation. However, some policies on biosecurity are devolved and fall under the remit of DAERA back home. So I believe it's very important, Madam Chair, today that we discuss these things in totality. I know I commend the Minister, glad to see him in his place, but one of his first things he did was do all of the regions in the United Kingdom when he got elected and Labour were in power, and I admire him for that, because it showed to me a Minister who was very clearly wanted to integrate and discuss matters with all of the regions, and I know when I asked and make a contribution about Northern Ireland that the right honourable member will be able to respond with the positives and the answers that we look forward to getting as well. It's also nice to see the Shadow Minister in his place. I wish him well in the new role that he has, and I'm very pleased to see the Lib Dem spokesperson in the front row. The honourable lady always sits here, one of the backbenchers. She's been elevated for today at least to the new roles. I look forward to her contribution later on as well. Madam Chair, I represent a largely coastal and rural constituency and have a fantastic relationship that I believe in with many local fishermen and with the farmers. I live on a farm in the Irish Peninsula, and coming from that background myself, I declare an interest as a member of the Ulster Farmers Union. I understand the importance of our biodiversity policies and the methods that must be used to protect against disease and protection. I'm going to mention a couple of examples of what has happened back home, and avian influenza and TB, to give an examples of why biodiversity is so important. There are several notable diseases of concern within the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. These are and include avian influenza, blue tongue, African swine fever, and TB. And I was grateful, as one example, to meet with Paul Stewart some time ago. He's a central manager of Castle Espy, a wetland centre in my constituency just outside Cumber. The centre is absolutely incredible. So the Wildlife and Wildfowl Trust. It's fantastic for observing and discovering wildlife, and hosts incredible events for people of all ages. Very much a must-go and see venue. Unfortunately, the centre had to temporarily close due to confirmed avian influenza present. And the discovery of a suspect case led to a 1.9-mile, 3-kilometre temporary disease control zone being erected around the wetland reserve. Now, that was absolutely tragic for that period of time. But they're out the other side. The avian influenza has been controlled and it's no longer there. So I'm pleased to say that the centre is now reopened with a disease prevention strategy in place, which I believe is incredibly important for the protection of the birds and the staff and the visitors and everyone in and around that place. Only days ago, Madam Chair, DAERA, again back home, commenced a review of Northern Ireland's approach to tackling bovine TB. It's a deadly disease that farmers are always on their nerves' ends worrying about. About 10% of herds across Northern Ireland are affected by the disease, which cost the public purse some £55.7 million in 23-24. My neighbour had a case of TB. Their dairy people, they milk well over 160, 170 cattle. They also have beef stock and calves, and they had an outbreak of TB. And it does, although it affected some, maybe 40 of their cattle, and not them all, thank goodness, it still has an incredible effect upon the farmer. I think it's always hard to equate that, but I know my farmer, I know my neighbour, I know how hard he works, and I know those to see those 40 calves going away in the lorry to be destroyed. Absolutely, you could see You can see the ache in his heart, I think I would say, Madam Chair, because it could not be created. Farmers aren't just farmers raising their livestock and doing all the things they do on a farm to necessarily make money. They have a love of their stock, of their livestock, and he quite clearly has. Furthermore, almost two-thirds of the total at 55.7, the 36.5 million was paid in compensation to farmers for the removal of animals, which is good that it happens, but it underlines again how deadly that disease can be. The Ulster Farmers Union have said that the review that has now been undertaken has contained no meaningful action to address bovine TB crisis in Northern Ireland. The Ulster Farmers Union are in the paper they chair every week in the Farming Weekly on a Saturday morning to say that of the concerns that he expresses on behalf of their members, the farmers. Again, if I could ask the Minister if it's possible to have some idea of any discussions he's had with the Minister back home in relation to bovine TB, how it can be eradicated and eradicated better, ever mindful that farming is a devolved matter and therefore the Minister here will have no say in what happens. But I know that the Honourable Member tells me that he's had constructive comments and discussions with the department back home, so it'll be interesting to hear what has happened to that. Yeah, absolutely.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. Would agree with me that the subject matter he's touching on now, in terms of liaising across the regions of the UK, is best replicated whenever we can see best practice being replicated across the regions. So, for example, the bovine TB issue that he's talked about, where it is working and it works well to combat that, it should be replicated, and the Minister hopefully can play a part in consultation with other colleagues as well to ensure that that best practice is repeated across the UK.
I thank my honourable friend and colleague for that. And best practice, the Minister will know this, and others in the Chamber will know that, and you, Madam Chair, will know it as well. I always think it's important that we share ideas across this United Kingdom, and where it is working, whatever that county level or regional level it may be, those examples should be taken and given to others. My neighbour, and this has just happened in the last 2 to 3 months, the TB outbreak. So I do understand the pain that he felt and the impact it had upon him. Bovine TB is a fatal disease which needs a proper prevention control strategy. The Ulster Farmers Union Deputy President has stated, and I quote, "There's extremely limited focus on the most critical issue, the need for an effective eradication programme that addresses all sources of infection. While it references biosecurity measures including post-movement testing and restrictions, it's not enough to only have biosecurity measures. I would be grateful if DEFRA can commit to undertaking some discussion with Minister Andrew Muir back home, the Minister in the Northern Ireland Assembly, to assess whether DAERA's review is missing and see what more this government here centrally can do to support the eradication of bovine TB and support our farmers further." Madam Chair, we have seen in the last month the dangers, potential risks to our biosecurity have. For example, in Wales, a case of blue tongue was found, and the panic, and I use that word purposely because it's probably at that level, that ensued across the United Kingdom about blue tongue and its implications. And the Honourable Member, by the way, referred to blue tongue in his introduction. I thank him for that. And he very clearly outlined farmers want to protect their herds, their flocks, their business, their farms, and these things can have an absolutely critical effect. Also, there was an outbreak of avian influenza confirmed in poultry in England. I think that affected one of the largest flocks of poultry in the mainland as well. I conclude, Madam Chair, with this. There is still more to be done in relation to the tackling and the eradication of all of these diseases. They have such an impact on livestock and on the farmers. I believe we must work together to ensure that our strategies are aligned regionally and, moreover, sustainable in tackling these diseases properly. So I look forward to engaging further in relation to this matter, and thank the Honourable Member for South Norfolk for bringing this topic today. I look very much forward to other contributions in this chamber and then a constructive and helpful response from the Minister at the end. Thank you so much.
Luke Charters.
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. May I first congratulate the Honourable Member for South Norfolk on securing today's debate on biosecurity. It's great he's continuing the fine traditions of members for South Norfolk advocating for pork markets. I'm proud to chair the APPG for food security. May I thank the member for Strangford for his warm words about the APPG. As colleagues will start to know, I'm a proud Yorkshireman who will always promote our region and the rural communities I represent at every turn. But there's nothing more critical than biosecurity because, as members have said, biosecurity is national security. So, can I take you on a journey this morning, Madam Chair? From DEFRA laboratories to the Port of Dover to farms in York Outer. Now, along that journey, I've heard about everything from the threat certain midges pose to blue tongue, to illegal raw meat being a risk to African swine fever, to poultry imports creating a risk around avian influenza. And on 2 of these, we've seen disease present in the UK. Thankfully, blue tongue controls are working, and there has only been one very much isolated case around an avian influenza outbreak in East Yorkshire. But I digress. Let me return to the biosecurity journey I've been on these past few months. I recently visited the Animal and Plant Health Agency in Weybridge. I saw their critical work to safeguard animal and plant health for the benefit of the people, the environment and the economy. I saw laboratories undertaking thousands of genomic sequencing, the infrastructure to ensure surveillance of new emerging disease, how they model outbreaks, their work as an international reference laboratory for many animal diseases. But for all their kit, it was the people that stood out under the steadfast leadership of Jenny Stewart, APHA Interim Chief Executive. People that do this to keep the UK safe and ultimately protect trade and our food production. They do it out of a vocation, so I thank them. And I hugely welcome the government's £200 million investment to support the transformation of the APHA's facilities at Weybridge. This will enhance their ability to respond to the threat disease outbreaks posed to health, farming, food security, trade and the economy. But in my typical Yorkshire style, Madam Chair, can I be direct though? We must continually keep the APHA's resources under review. If there was a black swan event or multiple complex disease outbreaks simultaneously, from what I saw on the ground, in that scenario, APHA may need additional support. I suppose it's not that dissimilar to what we experienced during the pandemic. Can I next turn to a recent meeting I had with the Dover Port Health Authority? And can I commend Bev Edmondson, Port Health and Public Protection Manager, whose dedication and commitment to public health really stood out. The amount of meat seized by Border Force officials has doubled in a year. We were briefed at the APPG on cases of illegal meat entering the UK. This is, of course, a risk to human health and public health, for example, through trichinella, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but there's a significant biosecurity risk here. African swine fever coming into the UK via this point of entry and entering into commercial pig production. It is at this point I would really like to underline a point, and I'm not one for scaremongering, but the National Audit Office estimated that the 2001 foot and mouth outbreak cost the UK economy £8 billion, equivalent to almost double that today. So as such, I would urge the ministers to consider granting DPHA a multi-year funding settlement, very much like our approach to local government, to support their work on an ongoing basis. As I heard from the DPHA, the intensity, complexity and volume of their work is increasing, and to have a multi-year settlement rather than the periodic rolling arrangement they have now would actually give them the opportunity to plan into the future. DEFRA should provide an update on the medium-term implementation and status of BTOM. Ensure that the system is effective is critical to trade and health, and I'm sure we could have a more specific and even more niche Westminster Hall debate on this very topic, but I'll leave the issue of BTOM here for this morning and invite the government to provide further updates on this in due course. But finally, Madam Chair, can I take us back to the meetings I've had with farmers in my constituency of York Outer, be that Hobson's Farm or the Wilson's Farm? They depend on a biosecure economy to trade. It's their livelihood. It is they who depend on us getting biosecurity right. So, from my meetings with the APHA, the DPHA, on the APPG and with the NFU and producer groups such as the BPC and MPA, we have quite the alphabet soup. However, I warmly offer to ministers the opportunity to talk about some of what I've set out in my speech in much more detail, and I'm very much looking forward to meeting Baroness Heyman soon, the Biosecurity Lords Minister. It's clear that recent funding announcements to Weybridge Labs and so on show that this government is taking biosecurity extremely seriously, and I look forward to supporting the government in this critical work. For Madam Chair, a good biosecurity system is a bit like a well-built Yorkshire dry stone wall, solid, reliable, and keeps the wrong things out.
Terry Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. And I'd like to thank my honourable friend from South Norfolk for securing this debate, and it's a very timely debate as well. And I'd like to commend him on the work that he has done since being elected to this House on key matters in this area. And it's a very timely debate for my constituency, as there is a proposal for a mega farm at Methwold in South West Norfolk. And myself and residents are very concerned about a number of aspects, not least that intensive farming is contributing to biodiversity loss as well as climate change, air and water pollution issues, and very often such farming practices adversely affect people living nearby, especially by posing health hazards due to ammonia pollution. And in relation to this debate, I note with great concern a report commissioned by Compassion in World Farming that found the risk of swine and bird flu pandemics could be increased by intensive pig and poultry farming. These farms concentrate significant numbers of confined animals, and in the Methwold proposal we're talking about almost 1 million chickens and 14,000 pigs on one site, increasing biosecurity risks. Now, this is not the only concern that we face. In 2022 to 2023, as my honourable friend has observed, Norfolk was very badly affected by avian influenza, and over the past few years we saw an unprecedented outbreak, with more than a fifth of all bird flu cases in England occurring in Norfolk. And I am sure my honourable friend, as a member for the Eastern region, will know that with our region having 20% of all of the UK's poultry flock, this is something that can break farms. Government figures show that the average cost to the government may be between £2 and £4 million per outbreak. And I believe that this is something the government needs to prepare for, and I welcome the measures announced so far. Prevention, as so often is the case, costs less in the long run, whether that's in regards to public health, the farming community, or at the supermarket checkouts. I'm also very proud to say that the British Trust for Ornithology headquarters are in my South West Norfolk constituency, located in Thetford, and their scientific research and their dedication is more important now than ever before, given the challenges that we face, not only as a country when it comes to biodiversity loss and the climate crisis, but also with regards to biosecurity as well. That research is absolutely critical to help with our understanding. In Britain, I like to think that we are a global leader when it comes to scientific study, and that should be championed. I vividly remember walking around the BTO Nature Reserve in Thetford and along our river corridors and forests and seeing scores of dead birds, wild birds primarily, but it was absolutely devastating. You could not miss the sheer number of dead birds that were very evident. Avian influenza significantly impacted our wild bird populations across Norfolk and further afield. And frankly, given all of the other environmental challenges that we face, this was really one that we could have done without. Can I firstly close by championing and congratulating the Minister for the work that he is doing, and indeed the whole government is doing, for putting Britain back on the map when it comes to leading on environmental policy. And I know that the Minister is very passionate about farming more generally and biosecurity, and he is very well respected by farmers in my constituency. He cares passionately about these issues and all farming related matters. I hope in his summing up he could provide further reassurance for my residents on the points raised. Thank you.
There being no more backbenchers, I call Sarah Dyke, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Dame Siobhan. It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair. And I thank the Honourable Member for South Norfolk for bringing forward this really important debate. We've heard about a range of biosecurity threats during the debate today. Each of them has a real potential to undermine our national security by disrupting our access to food, making our workforce sick or crippling our export market. But what concerns me most, however, isn't any single one of these diseases or pests. It's what would happen if the UK were to be hit with 2 or more of these outbreaks concurrently. The likelihood of this happening is greater than ever. We must recognise that threats like blue tongue, avian influenza and virus yellows alongside bovine TB are now part of the new normal, and our biosecurity defences need to have enough capacity to deal with them and future threats like African swine fever simultaneously. That means that ensuring Pirbright Institute and the APHA Weybridge are fit for purpose, that we are recruiting and retaining enough vets and border control staff, that there is sufficient rendering capacity to dispose of culled animal carcasses, and that we have a proper border control strategy. Now, I was alarmed when Dr Christine Middlemiss, the UK's Chief Veterinary Officer, warned the EFRA Committee earlier this year that parts of Weybridge APHA facility were at risk of being taken out of service. So, Dame Siobhan, I welcome the additional funding that the government has promised the facility, and I seriously hope that the £208 million is enough, not only to fund a much-needed refurbishment, but to transform Weybridge into a facility that will protect the UK from the biological threats of tomorrow. Our nation's biosecurity defences must consist not just of buildings, but of people too, Dame Siobhan. And despite the important role that vets and allied professionals like meat hygiene inspectors play in protecting us from disease, and despite the clear evidence that there is a shortage of them in agricultural supply chains, the government's workforce data is poor. Unlike the United States and Australasia, who are also facing similar vet shortages, we don't even know the scale of the problem, let alone how best to solve it. But what we do know is that 45% of vets leaving the industry have less than 4 years of experience, that attrition rates in abattoirs is rising by 11% each year, and that many of our veterinary schools are struggling to get 2 qualified applicants for clinical teaching roles. Workforce shortages are a key challenge facing the veterinary profession, and these problems are particularly pronounced in rural areas like Glastonbury and Somerton. Solutions like creating new vet schools and increasing the number of university places will take at least 5 years to shift the dial on our vet workforce. This is why it is critical that the government transfers policy making of work visas from the Home Office into other departments like DEFRA. Improving our biosecurity will ensure that we can continue to prevent major infectious disease outbreaks, which are expensive and harm our international reputation, but will also create opportunities too. The 2 most widely discussed problems within agriculture currently are business viability and climate change. And what is often forgotten in these conversations is that vaccinations can play a part in supporting both. So, Dame Siobhan, as we have heard today, diseases like blue tongue, Schmallenberg and avian influenza cause livestock to have stunted growth. They fail to reproduce, obviously abort, and to be more likely to die. Now, I spoke to a farmer in Barton St David recently who told me this just means more inputs for lower outputs, and for consumers, it means more expensive food. He also said that it means more damage to the environment as well. So research from my alma mater, Harper Adams University, shows that controlling avian influenza reduces greenhouse gas emissions by almost 16% per kilogramme of meat without the need for culling. Following several successful campaigns from industry bodies, most livestock farmers now accept the benefits of regular vaccinations and parasite control. However, our inconsistent domestic vaccine capacity is preventing them from doing so. For example, this summer, sheep farmers saw yet another shortage of enzootic abortion vaccinations and continued shortages of ORF vaccinations. COVID-19 demonstrated that the UK is a vaccination superpower that can develop and procure the best proactive defences against new threats. It also showed us how vulnerable we are if we don't have access to them. So I would urge the government to bolster our vaccination production capacity by introducing a research and innovation fund that can support new and emerging technologies. Additionally, innovation must also be fostered within departments and government bodies. Now, it is worrying that the illegal import of meat has doubled to almost 70,000 kilos this year, which leaves us particularly vulnerable to African swine fever and foot and mouth disease. Whilst this must be tackled first and foremost by developing a joint strategy with Europol and Eurojust, the government could also slash the demand for these illegal imports by allowing food producers to safely provide cuts and products favoured by different communities. For example, if skin on lamb was produced in the UK, the incentive to illegally import would fall to near zero. Safeguarding our public must be one of this government's top priorities following 14 years of Conservative failure. So, Dame Siobhan, farmers' confidence levels have slumped to a record low, and part of the restoration of it must be to provide biosecurity measures that will protect the UK from both existing threats and the threats of tomorrow. Thank you.
Opposition spokesperson Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Dame Siobhan. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship today and to have the opportunity to contribute to this vital debate on biosecurity. Can I sincerely congratulate the member for South Norfolk for bringing this vital topic to the debating chamber. In terms of the B words that I have mentioned in this place since I've been here for the last 5 years, biosecurity is right at the top, and it's something that I am absolutely passionate about. I declare, Dame Siobhan, a very strong professional and personal interest in this as a veterinary surgeon. Can I first address some of the great speeches today on this important topic? The member for South Norfolk touched on the important issues of blue tongue, avian influenza, African swine fever, and the vital importance of the Animal and Plant Health Agency. He also touched very importantly on virus yellows and the importance of this topic area for animal, plant and tree health across the United Kingdom. It is so important. So thank you again for bringing this forward. The honourable member for Strangford, my friend, I'm just gutted I didn't get the chance to intervene on him, but he talked very much about the importance of biosecurity and joined-up thinking, Dame Siobhan, right across our precious United Kingdom. And also he made a very powerful intervention talking about the impact of bovine TB on farmers. That when you get that positive reactor, Dame Siobhan, how distressing, how devastating it is for the farmers. And I'm going to touch on that in terms of the mental health impacts that biosecurity breakdowns can have. The member for York Outer, the chair of the Food Security APPG, again talked about the importance of the Animal and Plant Health Agency and, very importantly, the people within that great institution that work in the front line to keep the United Kingdom safe. And also stressed the importance of more support for the APHA, and I will touch on that very firmly and robustly with the Minister in due course. Again, the member for York Outer highlighted, as members across the chamber have, the distressing and alarming situation of illegal meat imports coming into this country and the risks that may cause our agricultural sectors here, certainly with the risk of African swine fever and foot and mouth disease. The member for South West Norfolk, again, with personal experience in the front line in his constituency, the pivotal risks to both the poultry and the pig sectors if these diseases come in. And some of the diseases are here, avian influenza, as we have heard, but heaven forbid we get African swine fever. It would be devastating, Dame Siobhan, and catastrophic for this country. And finally, the member for Glastonbury and Somerton, can I thank her for championing the veterinary sector in there. She cited the EFRA Select Committee that I sat on in the last Parliament, and I chaired that emergency session on veterinary medicine where we had powerful evidence from the Chief Veterinary Officer, Christine Middlemiss. Can I take the opportunity, shamelessly, to have a big shout out to people like Christine Middlemiss, the Chief Vet of the United Kingdom, and also the Chief Vets right across our precious United Kingdom. Joined up thinking of these veterinary experts working together to keep our nation safe is so important, and we must champion them and we must support them. So now I want to move on. I want to firmly state that, as we have heard today, biosecurity is national security. Let me say that again. Biosecurity is national security. What we are here to discuss today is not some niche concern, but in fact something that is vital for human public health, food security, protecting our precious environment, and upholding animal health and welfare. The priority for this government must be to shore up the nation's biosecurity or risk the grim consequences of an animal disease outbreak, which could ravage wild and kept animal or bird populations, doing untold damage to our economy and indeed to our international trade standing. Now, my journey here to Parliament to be the first veterinary surgeon elected to the House of Commons since 1884 started back in 2001 when I spent a period as a veterinary inspector in the front line of the foot and mouth outbreak. I saw sights then that I never want to see again in my lifetime. The mass culls that devastated our rural communities were a horrific reality of what can happen when government gets biosecurity policy wrong. And I gently but also robustly say this to the Minister. This remains an ever-present warning to current ministers of whatever political party. We must never forget, and we must be vigilant, and we must stand prepared. In 2001, bustling farms and fields were left empty, and even the hardiest of stoic farmers could not contain their grief. One particular memory I cannot shake off came after we worked through the night with logistical support from the army to cull an entire herd of cattle, including the calves. And in the morning, the farmer and his wife invited me and my veterinary colleague into his home for breakfast. And he said to me that morning, "Do you know, Neil, this is the first time of a morning and the only thing I can hear on my farm is complete silence." Now, beyond the personal tragedies and the 6 million animals culled, the outbreak was estimated to directly cost the public sector more than £5 billion and £8.7 billion to the private sector in today's prices when adjusted for inflation. Tragically, we saw lives, livelihoods, and community mental health impacted. Now, fast forward 20 years, and the UK now faces a significant threat from diseases, as we have heard today, such as blue tongue virus, avian influenza, and heaven forbid if it crosses from the continent, African swine fever, and still, as we have heard today, the chronic presence of bovine tuberculosis. And just this year, we've seen cases of blue tongue across the UK, stretching from Cornwall to North Yorkshire, Anglesey to East Anglia. And in recent weeks, we have seen new outbreaks of the highly pathogenic avian influenza strains, including in Cornwall and Yorkshire. And we have the ever-present threat of African swine fever advancing across Europe, now present in many countries, including Germany, Italy and Poland, to name just a few countries facing this virus. And as we have heard, we have seen alarming levels of illegal meat imports being detected, Dame Siobhan. Moreover, back on to avian influenza. During the 2022-23 avian influenza outbreak, 5.4 million birds died or were culled and disposed of for disease control purposes. And as we have heard, huge numbers, distressingly, of wild birds died. Now, this is worrying not purely for bird life, but for other species too, including humans. Avian influenza has been reported in the US in dairy cattle and in marine mammals in South America. We all know the dangers of diseases that cross the species barriers including zoonotic diseases that move from animals to people. Now back to blue tongue, spread by midges. Between November 2023 and May 2024, there were 126 identified cases of blue tongue virus serotype 3, BVT3, in England. As of the 25th of November this year, 168 cases have now been identified. The Minister is on record and has confirmed previously that blue tongue is challenging to control without vaccination. So I'd like to ask the Minister today if he can assure the House, can the Minister assure us that the Government is increasing work on vaccine manufacturing and vaccine procurement for ultimate delivery and rollout? Now, on African swine fever, the European Commission has published figures detailing cases in more than 20 nations across the continent this calendar year. While we remain incredibly fortunate to avoid cases in the UK, we must remain vigilant or risk this highly infectious disease causing catastrophe for our pig sector. This need for vigilance was underlined by a recent Freedom of Information request by the BBC, which showed that the Border Force seized 70,000 kilograms of illegal and therefore unregulated meat in the 2023-24 financial year, up from 35,000 kilograms the year before. We've heard about the Minister updating us about the border target operating model. Can the Minister update us today on the status of that to keep us safe from diseases like African swine fever and foot and mouth disease? We know that checks are going to be starting at Sevington, 22 miles inland from Dover. Can the Minister reassure us that random spot checks still will be capable to be taking place actually within the port of Dover itself? It is so important that the unscrupulous and immoral people that are trying to smuggle foodstuffs in that potentially could devastate our farming and food sectors need to know that they can be targeted with checks. Now, live animal imports to this country also can cause a risk to both animal and human health in this country, with reports of Brucella canis, a disease we've not heard about today, but a disease in dogs that was sadly with limited treatment options and in many cases ending up with euthanasia of the dog, rising from 0 cases in 2019 to 187 in 2023. Now, this disease is zoonotic, meaning that it can transfer from animals to people, and there have been reports of dog-to-human transmission in the UK. It's vital, therefore, that the government looks at the pre-import health testing of animals such as dogs coming in from countries that have diseases like Brucella canis as endemic in those countries. Now, I was on the front bench supporting the puppy smuggling bill on Friday. That is now going to go into committee stage, and I urge the government to look very closely of the possibility of introducing pre-import checks to keep our animals safe coming in, but also human and animal health in this country. Now, Dame Siobhan, I hope the dangers of the infectious agents that we've heard about today, and I've talked about in my speech, are taken seriously, as we cannot afford to be complacent to the risks which threaten not just animal health, but human health as well. These risks threaten our economy, our trading links and standards, and the wider agricultural sector. To put it simply, if a major outbreak were to occur and we were not fully prepared to deal with it, the consequences would be catastrophic. The government, of whatever colour, must act to protect our nation's biosecurity. And to do this, it must fully support the APHA, the Animal and Plant Health Agency, which, as we have heard, is in urgent need of support. Again, I want to put on record my thanks and tributes to the veterinary, the animal officers, the scientists and the officials at the APHA who do so much to keep our country biosecure. The APHA's Weybridge site in Surrey is the UK's primary capability for animal health science. Now, I sat on the EFRA Select Committee in the last Parliament, and we strongly called for the redevelopment of the APHA's Weybridge facilities. In 2022, a report by the National Audit Office outlined that the APHA's HQ needed a complete redevelopment, and I guested on to the Public Accounts Committee when we looked at that as well. The site needs an estimated £2.8 billion redevelopment, or otherwise risks us leaving us unprotected against a major animal disease outbreak. And as we've heard today, if you get simultaneous outbreaks of different diseases, they are hanging on by their fingertips, and if they are challenged with multiple cases, we could have a catastrophe. It is vital, therefore, and I look again at the Minister, that the government invests fully in the APHA to ensure it maintains state-of-the-art facilities which can identify, respond to and manage emerging risks. The previous Conservative government rightly initiated plans with a £1.2 billion commitment in 2020 so that work could begin. But this now must be followed up by necessary further capital investment as a matter of urgency. I note that the new government in the budget has committed £208 million to support Weybridge's transformation, and I'm sure the Minister will cite that today. But they've got to go much, much further. That does not touch the sides. I therefore urge the Minister here today to make the case to Treasury colleagues for the site to be funded in full and for the remaining £1.4 billion to be committed. I repeat, biosecurity is national security. Without this full funding, the APHA's ability to respond to simultaneous infectious disease outbreaks will be severely limited, and we may have a national security disaster. Please, Minister, relay this message to your counterparts at the Treasury. Investing in the redevelopment of the APHA HQ in Weybridge is an investment in our nation's biosecurity, in our national security, our economy, and the lives and livelihoods of future generations to come. I know that before the general election, many members in the Minister's party, including the Minister himself, called for this funding and the full redevelopment. I now urge ministers, put their money where their mouth is and urgently safeguard our biosecurity. If the Treasury won't deliver this through the DEFRA budget, I would urge them to consider delivering it through the Contingencies Fund. I repeat, Dame Siobhan, biosecurity is national security. It needs to be paid for. I now want to, at the end, just come on to farming again. We need to support our farming communities when adversity strikes, such as we've heard today, acute disease outbreaks or extreme weather events. And when something more chronic happens, as we've heard today from my friend from Strangford, when farms get a positive result during regular bovine TB testing, we need to make sure that the mental health of farmers, vets, and everyone else is supported. Again, I cite the EFRA Select Committee in the last Parliament, where we produced a report on rural mental health, and we looked at these issues very closely indeed. Now, these pressures on the mental health of our farmers are increasing day by day, with extreme weather events, animal disease outbreaks, and financial pressures. And this is now more important more than ever, with the increased pressures that this Labour government, sadly, is unnecessarily putting on farming communities with, I have to say it, their incredibly ill-judged and heartless family farm tax. I look at the Minister and say, please reconsider. Today we are holding a debate in the main chamber, Dame Siobhan, on this heartless family farm tax. I hope that every member across this chamber, and I hope that Labour MPs here today and their colleagues will vote today for their farmers, for their rural communities, and send a strong message to the government They've got this wrong, and they need to reverse this heartless, awful, awful family farm tax. Further to that, I'm very keen to hear, we've talked about mental health today, for the Minister to reiterate what support the government will give to the mental health of farmers and rural communities who face infectious disease outbreaks when biosecurity breaks down, who face extreme weather events, or who face the stress and the pressure of financial situations. On that point, I want to mention the tremendous work of charities up and down the land supporting the mental health of our farming communities. These include Yana, who I know members opposite will know well, who I met with recently to discuss their outreach coming over into Essex from Suffolk and Norfolk, as well as RABI, Farmerados, the Farming Community Network, Yellow Wellies, Vet Life, and many, many others. I say to them a deep and sincere thank you. To conclude, I'm being repetitive, but I think it's worth it. Biosecurity is national security. Compromised biosecurity affects everything from animal health, public health, to the price of food, trade, to our position in the world stage, and indeed our precious environment. The COVID pandemic sent us a very clear message. Some infectious diseases do not respect borders or species barriers, and we ignore this at our peril. I call and urge the government from the bottom of my heart to fully fund the APHA HQ redevelopment, fully fund it, to make sure the burning pyres of slaughtered animals, as well as the economic and mental health devastation of foot and mouth, remain resolutely confined to the history books.
Government Minister Daniel Zeichner.
Thank you, Dame Siobhan. It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair. And I'd like to start by thanking my friend, the Honourable Member for South Norfolk, not just for securing an important debate like this on biosecurity, but first for winning South Norfolk, which is very precious to me, but also for his continued commitment to championing our agricultural sector, because East Anglia is a crucial part of the UK's livestock and, of course, particularly arable sector, and provides the quality produce that both underpins our nation's food security and, of course, is in demand across Europe and beyond. I think, again, this has been a thoughtful and sensible discussion this morning. Let me start by reiterating the government's total commitment to all those who work in the agricultural, horticultural sectors and all those beyond. They're absolutely on the front line, not only of producing our food, but also protecting our national biosecurity. And I was very struck by the passionate interventions made by all speakers this morning. I listened closely to the Honourable Member for Strangford talking about the impact that bovine TB has on people. I was struck by my Honourable friend from South West Norfolk, his account of walking through Thetford and seeing the dead birds after the avian flu influenza outbreak. And also, of course, I couldn't help be struck by the member from York Outer, who I think summed up biosecurity very well in terms of that Yorkshire wall. Solid, solid, well built and designed to keep out things we don't want to hear. I think it's paraphrasing his words, but a very good account of what we're trying to achieve here. And I also listened closely to the member for Epping Forest, with his very powerful personal experience of the foot and mouth outbreak. I don't think anyone could fail to be moved by that, and also echo his warm words for those within our government departments, such as the Chief Vets and Christine Middlemiss in particular, for the work that they do. So I think there's actually a lot of agreement in this chamber this morning about the importance of the issue and our support for those who are working in it, because biosecurity is vital, absolutely vital. It does absolutely underpin safe food, protects animal and plant health, and supports a prosperous economy and trade. And it's a joint endeavour. Government, animal keepers, horticulturalists, and the public must do everything we can collectively to keep disease out. And the costs, as we've already heard from members this morning, are significant. Plant diseases alone are estimated to cost the global economy over $220 billion annually, and up to 40% of global crop production is lost to pests each year. Huge numbers that are sadly unlikely to reduce as climate change drives the geographical expansion and host range of pests and diseases. And healthy plants and animals are not just an important tool in the fight against climate change and biodiversity loss, but also contribute directly to many of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, in particular to ending hunger, achieving food security, improving nutrition and promoting sustainable agriculture. Because pests and diseases know no borders. New and emerging threats are often the result of trade and globalisation, and then further exacerbated by climate change. But safe trade is essential to food security in a thriving economy. We want healthy trade to support food security and the economy, but at the same time, we need to protect ourselves from risks. And that's why DEFRA is a key delivery department of the UK Biological Security Strategy. That strategy takes a UK-wide approach that strengthens deterrence and resilience, projects global leadership, and exploits opportunities for UK prosperity. In parallel, the Environmental Improvement Plan sets out how we will improve our environment at home and abroad, including through enhancing biosecurity. So I can assure the House we have in place robust measures to maintain and improve our ability to understand, detect, prevent, respond and recover from outbreaks, both those that affect animals and those that affect plants. One of our first defences is to understand the threats and to monitor the risks. And we do that through established expert groups: the Veterinary Risk Group, the Human and Animal Infections Risk Surveillance Group, and the Plant Health Risk Group. And our programmes of research support these expert groups. For example, for plant health, DEFRA has invested more than £8 million into ash dieback research, including the world's largest screening trials for resistant trees, the Living Ash Project. While for animal health, DEFRA and the Biotechnology and Biological Sciences Research Council are funding £6.5 million worth of projects on research to better forecast, understand, mitigate and avoid vector-borne diseases transmitted by mosquitoes and ticks. Our second line of defence is detection through strong surveillance systems. Our network of official laboratories, veterinary investigators, border inspectors, bee, fish and plant inspectors all contribute to the early warning detections for signs of disease or antimicrobial resistance. Third, prevention is key. As the saying goes, prevention is better than cure. So this government will take action to prevent pests and diseases from arriving in the first place. Now, preventing an outbreak of African swine fever in the UK, for example, remains one of our key biosecurity priorities. Whilst as rightly been said, we've not had an outbreak of ASF in the UK, the overall risk of an incursion is currently assessed to be medium. We continue to prepare for a possible outbreak. To help prevent ASF incursions in the UK, robust safeguard measures are in place prohibiting live pigs, wild boar or pork products from affected European Union areas from entering Great Britain. Enforcement is carried out by border forces and the Port Health Authority officers at seaports and airports. And under the enhanced safeguard measures introduced in the autumn, and I was grateful to the member for York Outer for referencing these points, under those measures, travellers are no longer allowed to bring pork products into Great Britain unless they're produced and packaged to the EU's commercial standards and weigh no more than 2 kilograms. DEFRA and its agencies continuously review the spread of ASF and other diseases and are ready to introduce further biosecurity restrictions should these be deemed necessary in response to new scientific and risk data. Fourthly is our response capability. Our disease contingency plans and underpinning legislation are regularly reviewed to ensure they remain fit for purpose and that we have the necessary capacity and capability to respond. So we exercise our plans regularly, work closely with stakeholders on their own preparedness as well.
Will the Minister give way?
Very happy to.
I'm very grateful to the Minister, and he's going to be talking about some of the contingency plans. Just back to the African swine fever issue, he has not touched really on my question about will there be the capability to have random spot checks within the Port of Dover itself. We know that the inland centre is there and it's going to be up and running, but it's so important that the unscrupulous people coming in know that they can potentially be targeted within the port so that these illegal meat imports can be snapped out.
I absolutely share his concerns, and we're working closely with the Port Health Authority to make sure that everything that is necessary to be done can be done. So we exercise our plans regularly and work closely with stakeholders on their preparedness. The ongoing response to blue tongue and highly pathogenic avian influenza are cases in point. Officials from across the UK are working closely with sector representatives on the implementation of control measures. Turning to blue tongue, early identification was crucial to enabling a rapid response to the outbreak. DEFRA provided free pre-movement testing to animal keepers in counties at the highest risk of incursion from infected biting midges originating from the continent. A restriction zone has been established to cover the counties affected by blue tongue. This measure has been carefully considered to protect the free area from disease spread while allowing free movement of animals within the zone, keeping business disruption to a minimum. And turning to the question raised by the Honourable Gentleman from Epping Forest, I can tell him that permitted use of BTV3 vaccine is available. I'm told that just over 14,500 animals have been vaccinated so far. Now, I'm also aware from the Honourable Gentleman of South Norfolk about the reports that some meat processors may have taken unfair advantage of the outbreak to reduce prices. And that's dreadful. I do not condone that behaviour at all, not least since blue tongue does not affect the meat. Now, my understanding is it's not a widespread issue, and prices paid to farmers for beef and sheep continue to be stable and at a 5-year high. And this is a good example of why this government considers fairness in the supply chain as being critical for farmers across all sectors. I'd also like to provide reassurance that the blue tongue virus is not a public health threat, does not affect people or food safety. Whilst no sick animal should enter the food chain, meat and milk from those infected animals is safe to eat and drink. Now, virus yellows was raised by a number of members, and I can just briefly say that a lot of work is going on, particularly at the John Innes Centre in Norwich, or just outside Norwich, working closely with British Sugar. I understand it's a project working with the biotech company Tropic. I personally stood in fields looking at varying degrees of sugar beet suffering from these yellows. Our proposals on genetic engineering in the future may well provide some solution, but there are also, in the shorter term, other new innovations being looked at which should give us better ways of tackling this absolutely, and as the Honourable Member said, serious disease, particularly for our region in the east of England. And for plant health in general, joint working with the horticultural sector also takes place, not least with the Royal Horticultural Society and the Horticultural Trade Association through the Plant Health Accord, the Tree Health Policy Group and Plant Health Advisory Forum, and Plant Health Alliance, who lead the Plant Health Certification Scheme. Now, but as I've already set out, biosecurity has to be a shared endeavour, and the Prime Minister and President of the European Commission have agreed to strengthen the relationship between the European Union and the United Kingdom. We are working with the European Union to identify areas where we can strengthen cooperation for mutual benefit. We've been clear that a veterinary cyto and phytosanitary agreement could boost trade and deliver significant benefits both to the European Union and to the United Kingdom. But delivering new agreements will take time, and it's important that we get the right agreement and that we meet our international obligations and protect the UK's biosecurity and public health throughout this process. Furthermore, maintaining our high standards requires constant investment. Let me turn briefly to the Animal and Plant Health Agency at Weybridge. The Honourable Gentleman has made a powerful case. I'm afraid this government is not in the business of making unfunded commitments. We have announced £208 million for the next phase of the redevelopment of the Animal and Plant Health Agency's Weybridge laboratory. Again, I would echo the powerful comments from my honourable friend from York Outer, praising Jenny Stewart and her staff. And I think this is true right across the entire piece, that we should pay thanks to all who are working on our behalf. We believe that £208 million investment will help to safeguard and enhance the UK's capability to respond to the threat from both animal and plant diseases, help protect public health and underpin the UK's trade capability with animal export products, which are worth £16 billion per year to the UK economy. Now, APHA is also looking to grow its external income streams over the coming years to support delivery of key services, recognising the efficiencies we all need to deliver in these challenging times. I've talked a little bit about blue tongue. Let me also now turn to the threat to our poultry sector. Again, a point powerfully made. Of course I will.
Very grateful to the Minister for giving way. I have a lot of respect for the Minister and I like him a lot as a person as well. Before he moves on from the APHA, I acknowledge that the government has put £208 million forward. The previous government committed £1.2 billion. It still needs £1.4 billion. Please, can the Minister give assurances that, I know he can't make Treasury commitments on behalf of the Chancellor, but that DEFRA will still keep making representations to Treasury that that refurbishment needs to be undertaken in full. The £208 million is a start to help with the transformation, but it needs to be committed for national security. Please, will he and his DEFRA colleagues make the case to Treasury, and if it can't be from the DEFRA budget, from the contingencies fund?
I hear his point and I respect the point he's making, but I would just gently point out to him the reason the country is in such an economic mess is that we can only spend the money that we have, and it will be a point that will be reiterated in debate after debate after debate. Every part of our rural economy, every part of our country needs a sound economic basis upon which to proceed. The previous government did not take that approach. We will. Now, in response to the detection of two new cases of highly pathogenic avian influenza in poultry in England this autumn, DEFRA and APHA have stood up the well-established outbreak structures to control and eradicate disease, restore normal trade and assist local communities' recovery. Now, we are in a better place than we've been in previous years, but it's absolutely no complacency, and honourable members across the House have referenced the situation that we are in. It is too early to predict the outlook for future seasons, and risk levels may increase further this winter. Obviously, we hope they don't. But it is associated with the migratory pattern of wild waterfowl and the environmental conditions sadly becoming more favourable for virus survival. And as I've said, I was very taken by the points made by my honourable friend from South West Norfolk about the impact on the wild bird population, as well, of course, on our kept birds. So we continue to closely monitor the avian influenza outbreak and any effects it may have on bird keepers, poultry producers and processors, in addition to those wild bird populations, particularly those of conservation concern. And we urge all bird keepers, whether they have pet birds, commercial flocks, or just a few birds in a backyard flock, to maintain stringent biosecurity to protect the health and welfare of their birds. Slaughtering of turkeys and other birds for the Christmas market has already begun. We do not currently anticipate any impact of avian influenza on supplies. And further information on the latest situation and guidance on how keepers can protect their birds from avian influenza can be found online from government sources.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I certainly will.
Thank you very much. One of the things I've just asked gently on the insurance issue that I raised in my speech, it's a huge part of the sectoral fragilities that we see on this. Is this something that the department will be able to look into, insurance companies that are refusing to give avian influenza insurance payments?
He raises an important point, and it is a complicated point, but my officials are in discussion to look at what we might be able to do. Let me conclude by reiterating the point that I will.
I thank you very much for your responses to us. Minister, my comments, and I know the Minister will do this, but just for the have it enhance it and have it on the record, I'd suggest ask the Minister, would he have some discussions with the Minister back home, Andrew Muir, and listen to the bovine TB, the problems that we're having. We have some of the biggest outbreaks in all of the United Kingdom. I'm just wondering, is it possible to work better and closer together to try and address that? I understand that Minister Muir will love to hear from the Minister and to get his thoughts. Thank you.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman's intervention. I very much enjoyed meeting Minister Muir a few months before the election when I was the Shadow Minister. Interestingly, it was bovine TB that was being discussed in the Assembly that very day. So I absolutely take his point. I'd be very keen to visit. When we're not having weekly debates on other issues, maybe there'll be the opportunity to go and talk to friends in the devolved administrations. So, in conclusion, Dame Siobhan, we do not underestimate the biosecurity threats we face or the challenges the agriculture and horticultural sectors are facing. We will continue to regularly test our capabilities to ensure resilience and respond to those threats through exercises and horizon scanning. And we will learn lessons when outbreaks do occur and make the necessary improvements. We will continue to work closely with sector groups on preparedness and response and remain ever grateful for their insight and commitment. And I'd like to thank all honourable members for a very informed and thoughtful discussion this morning. I genuinely believe there are many opportunities ahead for the agricultural and horticultural sector. We're absolutely committed to making the most of them and to ensure the industry can best contribute to our country's food security and economic growth.
Ben Goldsborough to wind up.
Thank you very much, Dame Siobhan. The great thing that we've had with today's debate has been there's been a unanimity of voice in terms of the personal stories that we've heard from across the United Kingdom about the impact of this biosecurity fragility on individuals that are working not only to farm our land, but those that are working to protect our farmers as well as our horticulturalists. The thing that has shone through throughout the whole debate for me is the ability for us to pull together on certain aspects that we know are in our national interest, that we know that party politics does not play a line in this, that we need to work together to find a route forward to drive a way of protecting those industries and those sectors, but not only that, our human health as well. As has been noted by honourable members across the House, the pathogens that can cross we have seen with COVID-19, we've seen with other diseases across the world, and we have to be of the utmost vigilance for those. And I just want to thank my honourable friends as well for attending and raising the issues that have happened across my good county of Norfolk in terms of the mega farm issue that is going on in southwest Norfolk and in terms of the aspects that you've brought with your expertise for the member for York Outer in terms of chairing of the APPG. But that's not to say that this isn't an issue that will be going on. I know we will have a lot more discussions about this in the future. But again, thank you so much for this debate.
The question is that the House has considered biosecurity. As many are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. Sitting suspended until 11 a.m.